You're listening to the Feed Your Wild podcast, a conscious lifestyle show about all things nourishing for your body, mind, and soul. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join me for candid conversations with changemakers, exploring health and wellness, food as medicine, intuition and spirituality, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and feed all parts of your wild self. Hello and welcome back to Feed Your Wild. I am your host, Vanessa Rodriguez, functional nutritionist, Akashic Soul Record Reader and Channeler, and your intuitive nourishment guide today. I am excited for this solo episode. It's been a really interesting past couple years, really a year and a half, of everything unfolding for the collective and really intense and you could say transformative and baffling and really deep ways. There are so many ways to describe the experience on a collective and personal level over the past year and a half. And I thought that it would be really cool to do a sort of an overview of the top themes, lessons, the patterns that I have seen over the past year and a half of doing well over 300 Akashic readings for people. For anyone who's new or is not familiar with the Akashic Records or my work as an Akashic Record Reader and Channeler, just a quick primer for you before I dive in. First of all, I have an entire episode all about the Akashic Records. It's called Akashic Records 101. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes below. So if you listen to your podcast on an app where you can click on the links, then you can access it there. You can also get all show notes for all the episodes every time on my website, wildlyrooted.com/podcast, and you'll find everything there. So with the Akashic Records and Akashic Record readings, I essentially do intuitive readings and channeled readings, not just for the collective, which you hear on a monthly basis. For example, our Akashic Soul Nourishment reading for October, which was released on the 1st. I encourage you to check that one out. But I also am a practitioner that works with people and clients doing intuitive readings as well as what I call soul nutrition sessions. As a functional nutritionist, I combine the intuitive work with my nutrition work, although all of those sessions have booked out through the end of the year for the soul nutrition sessions. But I do Akashic readings and healings on an individual basis. And in these readings, they're essentially intuitive readings where we open up your Akashic records, essentially the database that holds the vibrational, historical, and future information of your soul record, and sort of like the library. If you have your section of the library, we can access information, opening up your Akashic records, and they can be incredibly supportive for clarity, for receiving clarity, for answering any questions that you might have about your soul's journey, what might be going on with you right now, challenges that you've been experiencing, and also healings can come through. And so what I wanted to do today was actually share some of the top themes and lessons from doing well over 300 Akashic readings for individuals over the past year and a half, while all of us have been journeying with this collective experience with COVID. And of course, I'm not going to reveal any individual information. This is not about talking about what specifics came in for individuals in their readings. This is more of an overview and really looking at patterns and themes, which I thought was really fascinating. And so I thought that I would share it with you. I did want to mention that before I dive in, if you are interested in an Akashic record reading with me and your personal intuitive reading and channeling, then I highly recommend you sign up for that ASAP, because if you haven't heard any of my past episodes or follow me on Instagram, I'm really pregnant. At this point, I am about 7.5 months pregnant, and so I will be closing books for one-on-one readings mid-November. So you have about 1 month to sign up for the Akashic readings if there are slots left over. If you were really wanting to get some intuitive insight and guidance before the end of the year, before we hit 2022, I cannot believe it. So to do that, best way, go to my website, wildlyrooted.com/Akashic Records. And there you'll find information about what they actually are. I also have the Akashic Records 101 episode there if you want to learn more about them, if you're not familiar with them first, before deciding to get a reading, and also to sign up to see if there's slots there. So you would click the button, check out my scheduler, the calendar, get a booking, and we will see each other over Zoom. These all are facilitated over Zoom. They're 45 minutes long, and we can usually fit all of your questions in that 45-minute slot. And very often some healings will come through as well, some energetic healings and practices and tools and tips. And you're going to hear a little bit more about the types of things that can come through in this episode as I describe some of what I have seen come through for others over the past 1.5 years. All right, so with that, let's dive in. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was I really thought that there would be a lot of people asking about COVID itself, right? Like here we have this pandemic, and then this year, 2021, the rollout of vaccines. And so I thought that I was actually going to get a lot of questions and inquiries about COVID itself or the vaccines or some variation of that from people. And I'm telling you, I over 300 readings, and I don't think there was a single person asking about COVID or the vaccines. Now, there were some folks who were vaccine injured who did inquire about their situation and, and insights around it. And I always have to preface with the fact that these intuitive readings, they're not medical advice. I am not a medical doctor. I am a licensed nutritionist. But when we're doing our Akashic record readings, there are no prescriptions here. By any means, is there any insight that might come in that has to do with the body that I would say, absolutely follow this, or this is, what is actually going on for you? I am also not a medical intuitive. I receive insights from your guides and your higher self and the records about what might be going on with you. But it's very different than meeting with, let's say, a medical medium or a medical intuitive who has their psychic faculties and proclivities are more geared toward being able to literally know and see and intuit what's going on for you at the body level. So I just wanted to make that distinction, and to also really highlight that, I thought that we were really going to focus in on that. And I was kind of nervous, to be honest, to just hold space and ask guides and to receive information. There's always a level of responsibility that anybody who is a channel or an intuitive psychic who gives intuitive insight and provides services like this, there is a code of ethics, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with all of it. And so I'm not going to lie, in times like these, it was kind of nerve-wracking, to think about answering certain questions that hold such weight and heaviness and also upheaval and contention in these times. So I think the fact that literally most of the readings of the individuals who came were not really utilizing that time to inquire about that stuff, I think speaks volumes to the depth of the journey and the depth of the questions that these folks, people who have come to me for these readings, really held. And it's almost like they knew that there were some bigger things here for them. And of course, looking on a personal level, there's always other challenges or deep inquiries that people may have been holding for years that take precedent, that take priority. So here I wanted to share the top themes and some of the lessons that I learned by doing these readings for hundreds of people over this particular timeline. And the first of which is the theme of transitions, and also patience and pauses. Now, it's not surprising that a person who would want an Akashic record reading might be in a place of transition, right? But I think that really looking over the year and a half, I have probably seen every single person who has stepped in front of me on that Zoom call was in transition in some way, shape, or form. So most people are in a transitional phase. It also makes sense collectively when we look at what's happening. We're all sort of in this larger transition together. And for so many people, there is lots up in the air. There were perhaps many things that they thought were settled, or they were on a particular path that were then changed, shifted, taken away from them. For example, people losing their jobs, or like a deal falling through, and perhaps maybe a life circumstance that has changed and forced them to switch paths. So there was a lot of that happening for people on a personal level. And there's also this theme of the path is not clearly laid out before them, or it got diverted. And there is understandably, a level of confusion and frustration that comes with this. And you guys, I am right there with you. There have been so many pivots and changes and shifts and surprises, unexpected diversions that have occurred for me over the year and a half. And I'm seeing that as a theme for so many of the people that are coming in for these readings. Now, what's interesting is for most folks, when we tapped into that and really asked about it, the importance wasn't placed so much on the clarity of what was next or what is this path that they're on, but more so about the importance of being fully present to what is right now. And so a lot of the information that came from guides was on really embracing this pause, embracing this liminal space where there is no up or down or forward or backward just yet. There's no roadmap. There is no blueprint for your life moving forward just yet. There might be some nebulous-like sense of where the direction of where you might be needing to go. But it's almost like the lesson is that the medicine is in the pause. The medicine is in this liminal space, in this transitional space. And if we can be fully present and patient with this process, then we will receive and honestly see so much more. So that was a big lesson for so many people and for myself in doing these readings. Another thing that I saw was with that, there's a level of impatience, right? Where we feel like, oh, I feel all this tension, or I feel like all of this energy, and I just need to make a decision. I just need to pick a direction or take an action and move forward. And I'm telling you that for the majority of people who had that sense, the message for them was to trust the pause and to take some breaths and to remember the quantum aspect of time. So we're going to get more into time later because I think that's another fascinating thing that really came through. But time is not linear. That's not full reality, although we have definitely constructed a linear sense of time in our modern world. And so it could be a bit of this experience of dissonance to be held in space and in pause when, we feel like, shouldn't we be moving forward in this linear fashion? Another thing within this theme of transitions was lots of moving, physically and literally. So many people being called to move. I don't feel that this is a coincidence. I feel that in these transitional periods over the past year and a half to 2 years, that people are starting to feel we could say the pull or the calling from the energies of other places and also from within themselves, right? Because I think in times like these, it's really cracking us open and taking a look at what are all the things that maybe we've been putting in the back burner or we've been ignoring. And now we're in this liminal space. Now there's so many questions. Now priorities have shifted. Perhaps there's fear that's been coming up more often or anxiety. And so some of the things that perhaps have been there, maybe building slowly over time, are really starting to surface. And it manifests as this impetus, this desire to literally move. I think this also comes from a place of the impatience that comes in this waiting period, in this pause and transitional liminal space. We desire that energy and experience of moving because it's really, really hard to stay in one place. And I'm talking on all levels, not just physically. So I think there's some of that contributes to it as well. But it's also very, very clear that the earth, land, and community is calling people. Those are elements that are calling to people's hearts and souls, and people are beginning to hear it, so to speak. And so while there isn't necessarily clarity on where on earth or with whom are we going to move, there is this knowing that it's on the horizon. So I thought that was interesting. There's also, it seems to be sort of like this mass migration or shifting of populations. And I think that that's something that's going to continue to be a theme over the next couple of years. I don't think that that's going to slow down. I do obviously see how people in their reprioritization or perhaps looking at their values in life being called to move from the city to the country, for example, or for others, it's to be closer to their family, wherever they might be, whether they're in the city or not. And so really starting to get in tune with what are your priorities, what and whom are calling you, and can you honor the space here that we are all gifted with, really, this pause space to listen and not necessarily have that pressure to move or take an action or make a decision right now. In this theme of transitions, lastly, one thing that I did see is the breaking of ties, old bonds, old, if you want to say, curses, and sort of like the old matrix. Now, this can look in the form of relationships, jobs, even the way that you relate to yourself. It can be challenging to hear the truth, though, especially when it comes to relationships, for example. And one thing that I always acknowledge and see in every single reading is that the person, the individual, already knows a lot of this on some level. It could be like on a deep subconscious level. It could be in their energetic field or at a soul level. So it may not be fully conscious, but the moment that their guides provide this message for them, it's like, of course, I knew this, right? And so that's how you know that there's confirmation and that you must really follow that and connect with that yourself, really support your connection to your intuition and building trust. So yes, there was lots of a breaking of ties, looking at the realities within relationships, within your job, within also old bonds that may have to do with past lives or contracts, soul contracts that you have created with others or with yourself. So there's a lot that is within that particular theme, but just know that if you've been experiencing something that feels like, man, there is a pattern here, I just can't seem to break out of something, I feel like now is really the time to start to look at that. Whether it's a pattern within your own life, within yourself, or with another, and you want to make a change, I really feel that now, you could say it's always now. Now is always the right time. But it seems that collectively there are so many people in the very similar position that are going through these things too. And there's a lot of energy and support for you to move through those right now. Okay, so moving on to the next theme that I was really seeing come up was clearing, purification, and intuitive connection. Now, one of the main things that I saw for people was the importance of connecting to their intuition. And that's also a very common question for people when they come into an Akashic record reading is, how do I do that? How do I connect to my spirit guides? How do I enhance my intuition or, practices to support me? So, the answers that come in and the insights are always shaped by the questions and inquiries from the individuals. And that's a very common one. So it's not surprising that this is one of the main themes that I'm seeing over these many readings. Now, one thing that I did see was, even for the folks who were not asking these questions, how their guides were really adamant that it's time. It's time to start to operate in the fullness of themselves. And that means really looking at yourself as all that you are. You are an energetic body. You are an intuitive being. You have these extra sensorial capacities to assist you in moving through this life. And especially over the past year and a half, these are fundamental. These are so important. And this is also a theme that has been running in the Akashic Soul Nourishment Readings, the monthly Akashic Soul Nourishment Readings that I channel for the podcast every month. And they're always talking about, reclamation and liberation, but a huge part of that path is to reconnect with your intuitive faculties. So that's a really big theme that unsurprisingly showed up over these past few hundred readings. And invitations to connect with higher wisdom, with your higher self, with your spirit guides in the natural world. Now, the natural world really came in strong over the past year and a half. I felt like Mama Earth was definitely speaking to many of the individuals. So connecting with not just the natural world, but the devas and the elementals and the fairy realms. What's really interesting is I feel like I've been doing this work for over 5 years in terms of doing individual readings for people as part of my private practice. I've been working with the Akashic Records for over 8 years now on a personal level. And what I have seen is that over the past year and a half in particular, the fairy realms are really coming in strong for a lot of people. And at first, this is interesting because I feel that I myself learn so much just by doing my own Akashic readings, the ones channeled for the collective, but also, and especially, readings for individuals, because my sense of reality, or what I know to be true with a capital T, is always expanded and challenged with every reading, because I receive insights and I'm like, whoa, that's real, right? So I have been speaking within the fairy realm for quite some time, but what was interesting is that over the past year and a half, they've really come in strong for people. And if you're someone who's like, what the F, like, you're talking about fairies, this is wild, I don't really understand this, that's okay. You don't have to accept anything that may feel too out there for you. We're going to get even more out there, so just wait, buckle up. But I think it's important to meet yourself where you're at with this stuff, and you don't have to force yourself or push yourself to believe anything that doesn't feel resonant for you. So I just want to put that out there for people who might start experiencing some resistance to some of the information and aspects of the readings that I'm going to be sharing with you today. Okay, so as I'd mentioned, connection with the natural world, with devas, and with elementals in the fairy realm was pretty common for a lot of people. And the way to do so was also different for a lot of people, depending on where they're at in their life, what their proclivities are, what their interests are, where they are in the world, what's accessible to them. And so, for one person, it could be connecting with the trees is a really major aspect of their connection. For another, it would be with flowers or literally with like the fairies and going to parts of nature where they can connect in that way. And then, of course, indications for how to do so. And those are always received on an individual basis. Okay, we talked about invitations to connect with your intuition, your higher wisdom, with your spirit guides, and the natural world. And with all of this, trust was a huge theme because people lack a lot of trust around their own ability to connect and to use their intuitive faculties. And I think that for the past year and a half, there's really been an extra push from people's records, from their guides, around pushing through the distrust, pushing through the resistance, and pushing through the perhaps programmed beliefs that you cannot do this or that this is not real. And so cultivating trust was a really, really big theme in regards to this building of your own intuitive connection. Along with this, I had mentioned clearing and purification. Huge. So what everybody who came in for a reading, part of the process was removing, or we could even say remediating, energetic blocks, emotional blocks that are held in the body, in the field, programs, everything at its core is really vibration. And so even when we're looking at a programmed belief, for example, this is a vibration that's held in your field somewhere. So this could be in your body, like literally your hips are holding this belief or this emotion. And the supportive practices that we can do to start to help facilitate the movement, the removal, the remediation, the release of these things that were potentially holding you back or causing challenges, whether they're physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, also patterns in your life, like feeling like you're stuck in certain areas. So this is a huge one that came in pretty much for everybody. And it was different for everyone, of course, right? Because everybody has their particular experiences and their potential blocks for which they will receive customized guidance around that on how to remove or release those. One of the things that I saw sort of within that theme too was an up-leveling, an invitation to up-level one's healing abilities. Now, this I feel is both on an individual level, like someone being called to really help facilitate deeper healing for themselves, because we are all healers, we're self-healers, right? And our bodies, all of our bodies, the subtle bodies and the more dense mass physical bodies, are designed to heal themselves. Now, we have to support that by engaging with our innate faculties for being able to do so. So it's kind of like knowing how to operate software and hardware. And if you don't, sometimes it could get kind of clunky, if you're accumulating a bunch of junk and you're not doing regular maintenance. So it's really important. And there definitely was an invitation for people, and like I would say more than an invitation, kind of like a push for people to really up-level their own healing abilities, and also being called to step up into healing work in new ways. So a lot of folks that I did readings for are other practitioners. Some are intuitive practitioners, others are like physical healers. Some might have been chiropractors or therapists, nurses, right? There's all these different types of healers. And a lot of them are being called to step up into different forms of healing work that may be new to them. And so that seemed to be a really big theme, which makes me so happy because I'm like, thank goddess, we really need that. We really need people who are here to be of service, to heed that call, to say yes to that invitation and expand their work if they so choose. So that was another theme that I saw with it. Another one that I saw for some folks who have children or who are planning on having children was looking at ways to raise children so that they can cultivate their intuition and imagination and really enhance their innate faculties and gifts. So for these next generations, really seeing how the parents are being called to be stewards of this next generation of intuitive beings, that are choosing to come in at this time. And honestly, I saw this before I myself got pregnant. This was a theme running through. And now that I am, and I'm going to have my own kid, I'm really feeling this on a visceral level. And a lot coming through on a personal level when I do my own readings and when I connect to the spirit of my baby. There's a lot around that, a lot of guidance. And so I thought that was really beautiful and unexpected, but something that a lot of people who did have children, that seemed to be a theme for them as well. Hey, I'm interrupting this episode to bring you a special invitation. If you are a healer, helper, or a stuck empath that feels like they're really called to be in service, but just not sure how to move forward on that path, I have a special private and free training on how to create a transformative intuitive healing practice you love. In it, I include literally the culmination of everything that I have learned through my experience over the past decade as an intuitive healer and bridging the science and spirituality of healing work and creating a practice that not only supports your community, your clients and patients, but also brings together all of your gifts into a beautiful vehicle for your soul mission. This private training is available for those who apply to my Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway. This is my group mentorship and practitioner mastermind for healers and helpers who are ready to step out of the spiritual closet, expand their intuitive gifts, and go from struggling empath or conventional practitioner to what I call New Earth Intuitive Healer. In the Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway, aka WIP, together we initiate into the Akashic Records for intuitive connection, experiencing deep self-healing and unparalleled support for your clients and patients, and not to mention you. We discover your intuitive gifts and break through blocks, limiting beliefs, fears, and programmings that are holding you back. And you get to channel an integrative body of work that synthesizes your innate gifts, experience, and wisdom, and ultimately design a unique and valuable and effective holistic intuitive healing practice that's transformative and divinely led. This is an accelerated path held by a group with other heart-centered practitioners, healers, and change makers, getting some deep intuitive coaching, foundational intuitive healing training, personal growth curriculum, and practitioner practicum circles, as well as hands-on support from our team. If you're feeling ready to say yes to your calling as the intuitive healing practitioner you are meant to be, I invite you to apply today and get your instant access to the advanced VIP training, How to Create a Transformative Intuitive Healing Practice You Love. You can go to wildlyrooted.com/apply or click the link in the show notes, and I'll see you on the other side. Now, back to our episode. All right, moving to the third and last theme that I'll talk about today, I've lumped under timelines and multidimensionality. So this is where things get really interesting if they weren't already, or pushing the limits of, what feels most comfortable for you maybe. Now, time is a funny thing. And I talked about how, we have developed this perception of linear time, but really that's not how time works. And when we access the Akashic Records, it is accessing information beyond the time-space continuum, which can be really hard for our thinking minds to comprehend, to understand. But I would say that in so many indigenous traditions and wisdom keepers from around the world deeply understood the true nature of time and how time can shift. So one big thing that came through was that timelines are shifting for all of us on a collective level and on personal levels. What is a timeline, you might be asking? What does that even mean? When we think about our path, and we could say our soul journey here in this embodiment on Earth, we have a particular timeline that runs parallel to our path. Now, when we make certain decisions or shifts or changes or healings, our timelines can shift. So literally jumping timelines and jumping paths. Now, this starts to get into the question around fatalism and destiny, so fate and destiny. And I think this is a different discussion. Those are really big topics. And I will say this, that it has, from my understanding, my very limited understanding, because I'm not going to pretend that I have all the answers or I know all these things. But this is what I have learned from doing, thousands of readings and my own, and working with the guides and the Akashic Records, is that while there may be certain points in one's timeline that are common across all timelines, and you could say those are the fated points or the points of destiny, we also have tons of variability within the timelines depending on how we live our lives and the choices we make and the actions we take and our beliefs and all of that. One thing that has become clear is that, especially over the year and a half, there's been some major shifts in timelines for the collective. Now, that means that when someone wants to know when something is going to happen, it's nearly impossible to know because things are shifting constantly. So I received a lot of questions around, desiring to want to know when is something going to finally happen? When am I going to move? When am I going to get this job? When am I going to have clarity? The whole time question is just, before this year and a half was already really challenging to talk about or receive insight on, but especially now because it is wacky how quickly these timelines are shifting for all of us. So just know you're probably not going to get any clarity on when a timeline is happening for you. And I think that there's a lot of hope that can come with this as well, because things can change. I have come into this work over 10 years ago with the simple belief, like I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. I didn't know how I was going to help people. I didn't know I was going to get into nutrition. And I had no concept of the Akashic Records. Or intuitive work. Like that was so far beyond my comprehension of what I understood for myself. But what I did know was that I was going to help others to break the lineage of dis-ease that perhaps was driven by their family line, their so-called genetics, their family story. Because I knew that I was not going to end up like my mom. My wonderful mom, Norma, who ended up getting breast cancer and journeying with breast cancer for about 6 years until her passing. She crossed over in 2010. So I came into this work knowing that that was not going to be my fate, even though everything genetically said it would be, right? If I just looked at my genetics, if I just looked at my body and how similar I was to my mom, if I just looked at my health history and all the commonalities that I shared with my mom, I knew that I was going to change all of that. And that was not my fate. And that is jumping timelines. That is healing the lineage and breaking that lineage of disease. And so that's what the power of these jumping timelines can really provide for us and with us. So I just wanted to mention that because I think we can feel really discouraged when there's such a lack of clarity. We don't know what the F is happening or when or how. And just know that when we can stay really present for ourselves, for our family, for what's happening, then we can tap into our heart, we can tap into our intuitive abilities, receive messages and insights, and we don't have to know these answers that are more palliative for our thinking mind than they are healing for the heart. So I hope that's helpful because I know this can be a really big struggle for so many people. Now, on this topic of timelines and multidimensionality, here, I'm talking about the fairy realm. Well, a really big theme that came in for quite a few people were their ties to galactic families, galactic family ties, and support from galactic beings. And I would say extra dimensional or interdimensional beings. So again, I don't think we really have time to dive into what the heck all of that means, but just know that there is so much more beyond what we might see on this earth realm. There's so much more at play. We have connections, soul connections, energetic connections, and ties to beings that are not of this earth. And for many, a lot of their ties to galactic beings and families, so you could say not just extraterrestrial, but like I was saying, extra dimensional, from totally different like galaxies and places beyond your imagination, that there is communication happening there. And what's so beautiful is for so many people who received this particular message, it was like confirmation of, again, something that they had felt, but maybe they couldn't put words around, or maybe they were resistant to even hear it or accept it from themselves. it's not like these are things that we are taught anywhere, really, in any of our education systems. Maybe you had a family who, talked about these things. I know I did not, for sure. I really see how much support there is out there for not just individuals, for us as a collective. And again, to connect with these families, we could say greater and expanded families, star families, it's important, again, to build on our intuitive faculties, to get to know our energy bodies and how to utilize and open up communication in an intuitive way. All of that begins to open up. These lines of communication become clearer the more that we can really hone our skills. And it requires space and really intention for doing so. So you have to carve out that intention in that space for you to connect. Now, along with this multidimensionality piece, another thing that's interesting here are the multidimensional aspects of the self that came through for a lot of people. So again, when people come in for a reading, let's say that there's an ailment or there's a challenge or something that they're wanting to gain more insight or information about. A lot of times what came in was that there was some sort of extra dimensional, multidimensional aspect of themselves or aspect of their soul that was involved in experiencing this thing, or sort of like part of the root issue behind this thing that they were asking about. Meaning we exist in different realms simultaneously. Now, this comes back to the whole time thing and the question around past lives versus multidimensional or interdimensional lives. I feel that there is definitely a lot that we can glean from insights around our past lives. Now, what I typically recommend in any reading, like with anybody, does not just obviously with the Akashic Records, if you have a question about past lives, really connecting it and rooting it to a challenge or perhaps a theme or an area that you want more insight on, instead of just asking a general question about your past lives. Because the information that has come through around past lives for people always came in around the question about a particular challenge. And so that way we can really look at, well, what past life or multidimensional aspect of the self, a portion of yourself or soul that is in experiencing something in a different realm simultaneously, and what might be happening there that's contributing to whatever it is that you're maybe challenged with. I know I'm starting to get, we're already way deep into esoteric stuff, right? And this might start to get kind of confusing. I hope that I'm explaining it in as clear of a way as I possibly can without going too deep into the weeds into these different things. But I think the overall, we could say, takeaway from this is that there is so much more happening beyond what we can see with our eyes and feel with our sense of touch and hear and smell, right? With our mundane sensorium. There is so much we don't understand. There's so much beyond our conscious comprehension that is at play here as well. It's part of the so-called reality. The information that comes through in readings are meant to provide clarity and direction, and also to awaken some aspect of what it is you already hold within yourself. So you already know these things on a certain level. And what I have found is, especially with the Akashic readings over the past couple years, is the messages are meant to bring that up from the depths of the oceans within you to the surface so that you can start to work with that, be with it in a more conscious way. And that is a huge part of healing. I did want to touch on some common remedies that came through. And without getting into, obviously, individual recommendations that came in, because that would take forever. And I want to honor the privacy of everybody who received a reading. So I'm just going to give an overview of the most common types of remedies and suggestions that came through, because I think they're fascinating, really interesting, but they also kind of tell a story here as well. Now, when I say remedies, this can be practices, this can be food as medicine, it could be herbs that come in, but also ways of thinking and offerings from people's guides and from their specific records. One of the most interesting ones that came up for a lot of people was setting up an energetic space via altars or grids. Now, altars are obviously, and grids are ancient ways of connecting to these unseen realms and to also help to facilitate healing or certain things to happen. There were a variety of different types of altars that for various individuals were recommended. For example, ancestral altars, altars for their children, altars for vision, as well as grids, right? So grids being sort of forming an energetic space with stones, healing stones, gems, also plants and flowers, and that you can create grids for connection and protection. So that was a really interesting one. And honestly, I'm more familiar with altars and creating altars, not so much with grids. So I learned a lot from these readings. And one person that I would highly recommend you check out, if you're like, grids, that sounds really interesting and it's kind of hitting a resonant note for you, then I highly recommend you check out my interview with Sarah Thomas. The title of that podcast episode is Emergent Stone Medicine in an Awakening World. Sarah Thomas is an incredible healer and educator who owns Clarity Acupuncture in the Southern Appalachia. And they have worked with grids for quite some time. They have lots of insight there. And while we don't get into the nitty-gritty of grids in that particular episode, we do talk a lot about working with stones and stone medicine. And you can definitely check out the rest of Sarah's work with grids by going to her website. So I'll make sure that I link that up below for those of you who are interested in learning more. And I mentioned setting up an altar, an ancestral altar. Well, ancestors really showed up wanting to support. And that's also a very common question for people coming into an Akashic record reading as well, wanting to connect with their ancestors. So that wasn't as surprising. And a lot of it was guided by the questions that people bring. But nonetheless, even for people who didn't ask about their ancestors, ancestors definitely showed up wanting to support, showing themselves and inviting them to build a deeper and conscious relationship with them. So that's something that I would recommend as well. Meditation and contemplation. Now, I think that this is something that is one of those things you hear and you're like, yeah, I know meditation's good for me, but my oh my, is it like probably in every single reading for every person, there is some form of meditation or contemplation practice that is recommended. And so I think, again, this comes back to the importance of how to be a whole human. And that part of that is to engage with these types of practices. And meditation can look in so many different ways. So I encourage you to start to tune into a form of meditation that feels really good for you and start to play with it, because it literally was one of the top remedies and recommendations for almost everybody who I read for. Another one was sound healing and vibrational healing. Really huge, especially for physical ailments. So this came in the form of music, chanting, toning, specific beats and vibrations, seeing sound healers, and utilizing sound frequencies for healing. So it came in a variety of different ways for people, but that definitely was one of the top remedies and recommendations for people specifically with physical health issues. Again, it makes sense, if we're looking at the core of everything is really about the vibrational dissonance or harmony. And so the importance of sound healing for that. And there's so many different types. I myself am not as familiar in this realm. So I encourage you to really dive deep in your own research. Or if you're a sound healer or practitioner, I encourage you to share out your work and connect with people, because you're really needed. Another thing that I saw was some sort of brain retraining or neuronal rewiring was really, really important for a lot of people that came in for readings. Now, there's so many different forms of, you could say, brain retraining or neuronal training, rewiring. What this came down to was your nervous system, and also how the way that our brain is wired has a huge impact on our experience in the rest of the body and bodies. So especially with physical challenges and ailments. One thing that I know to be true, and I really started diving deep into this, it's been years because of the nature of the work that I do, and so much around the gut is also around neuronal rewiring and looking at the brain-gut connection. But on an intuitive level and receiving these messages, a variety of different practices came through. For example, brain spotting, neurofeedback. There's also vibrational medicine for the rewiring of the brain. Again, you can utilize various forms of sound healing for that as well. There's also specific forms of meditation that can help support with that. There's EMDR, so eye movement practices and therapeutics. There's so many different therapies that are really supportive for the brain, and a lot of ancient therapies as well. So I feel that the yogis have a leg up on this one, so much with breath work, pranayama, meditation, yoga, even the asanas are a huge part of this rewiring of this neuronal network. And that can all be helpful. So I think it's not so much finding the one thing that is the panacea or the cure. It's really about engaging with what is calling to you, what feels most resonant. And it may change, season to season, year to year, and really just staying in tune, so to speak, with what your body and your mind are asking of you. So I'll offer that up. Lastly, I did want to touch on the fact that everybody, especially for those with physical challenges, received customized rituals. So there aren't any rituals that were generalized and, for everybody. what I saw was really highly customized rituals and specifications come in for individuals, which I think, again, is really important. And it reminds us of our individuality and our complex experience as individuals, that one person's medicine may not be medicine for another. It may be a bit poisonous for someone else and vice versa. So really starting to pay attention to what does your body, mind, soul, spirit need versus looking at what works for everybody else. But within some of these rituals and remedies, I wanted to touch in on the final, most common remedies that came through for people. And these are my favorites because they're just so fun to engage with. And I myself is just really loving the plant world as well, was really excited by some of the recommendations that came in for people from their guides. Flowers, flower essences, and spagyrics. So flowers and flower essences were huge for so many people over the past year and a half. Not surprising, flowers and their essences really work on a subtle vibrational level. And it feels that so much of what people are working through or are really being faced with over the past couple years has been on the vibrational level, the subtle vibrational level, and sort of that like energetic and soul level. So depending on the person, these recommendations were different for everyone. Some generalities that I saw with the flowers and flower essences were roses were actually pretty common. Roses are a beautiful choice. They are amazing for the heart. There's so much more that they're great for, but that seemed to be sort of the theme, is like a lot of heart healing for people and an opening up. And roses just bringing in so much sweetness as well as protection. So roses seem to be pretty popular for folks in terms of what came through for their remedies and recommendations. But they really ranged all over the place, carnations, dandelions, peonies, St. John's wort. There's just lavender. I mean, they span the spectrum. I learned of some new flowers. There's also datura, which actually was another one that came in for a good portion of people. I would say roses probably more so. Datura is also the moonflower. Beautiful energy. You do not want to consume that flower as a form of tincture or eating it or anything because it is poisonous, but as a flower essence, that one came in. I think that, that one is really supportive for grief as well, and kind of like this blooming through the dark night of the soul. And so it's no surprise that the datura came in for quite a few people over the past year and a half. And along with that, datura is white, but white flowers in general being very common too. So the energetic vibration of the colors of flowers, white flowers being some of the most commonly recommended, and that really being connected to sort of like the intuitive connection, the spirit connection, purity, clarity, like the purification process. There's so much there. And the energetic vibration of fresh flowers. So literally bringing in fresh flowers into your space was something that was unexpected, but came in for a lot of people. So that's something that I'm going to start to do more regularly, and I recommend. Now, lastly is the spagyrics. And some of you may not be familiar with spagyrics. I'm a huge fan, but I didn't really start learning about them until about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago when I started to work with my clients, bringing in recommendations from the Akashic Records, and they would show me these things like, yes, using this plant, but all of the plants, like holistically. And I was like, what does that really mean? Because isn't using plant medicine, all plant medicine, holistic? And what I eventually learned and came to learn from some teachers was the power of spagyric medicine. Spagyrics are a form of medicine, of alchemical medicine, so alchemy, where you're using all energetic aspects of plants. So you could say the energetic architecture of plants. So not just the constituents, like the chemical constituents, or even making, for example, making a regular tincture with an alcohol extraction, or making a decoction or an infusion like a tea, we're using that plant matter. Spagyrics use literally all forms of the plant, so there's hardly any waste. And each aspect of the plant holds an energetic vibration and a signature that connects to the body, mind, spirit, and soul. They also connect with the planets that are related to the plant as well. It's fascinating, and it truly is sort of like the herbal analog to the work that I really try to do in my own practice, which is to bring the soul and spirit back to medicine, and not just focusing on the body or even the mind and emotions, but really looking at the energy body and the soul and the spirit of the person. And how can we work with this whole person and really tend to the true roots of what is going on, which is why the way that I do it is by bringing in the intuitive nourishment element, the Akashic Records in my work and in my teachings. And so all of my programs and teachings are really looking at all of these levels. But this is a way to do it through herbalism and working with plants. It's really exciting. And it also is one of the main herbal recommendations that came through for people. Now, of course, it wasn't the same spagyric for every person. It was very different depending. And I also always recommend that, again, like when we're working with the Akashic Records, you might have these recommendations come through, but it really is up to you to do your own research and your homework. And if there's something around an herb or a medicine or whatever remedy it is that comes through, you want to make sure that you're working with someone who fully understands that medicine, that particular remedy, and how it can support you. So spagyrics were a big one to come in for people. And I'll give you a very crude, basic concept of how to make a spagyric, of what they are, so you really understand. So basically, with a spagyric, you're working with all aspects of the plant. And you have the spirit of the plant, which is the alcohol, but within the spagyrics and alchemy, you're actually making the alcohol from the actual plant that you're using. So you're not taking an outside alcohol like vodka or Everclear or some other form of alcohol to bring in for the extraction. You're actually making the alcohol from a fermentation process of the actual plant that you're using. You have the what's called the sulfur component of the plant. So this is the essential oil or the volatile oil of the plant. So we might commonly know this as the essential oil, and very medicinal parts of the plants. That one is really connected to the soul of the plant. Then you have the mercury of the plant, which is basically the chemistry, and that's the alcohol that I was talking about, the extraction of that, but making it from the actual plant, which is connected to the spirit of the plant. And then you're working with the salt of the plant, which is basically its body, its alkaline minerals. So you're going to do this by utilizing the mass of the plant. So typically when you're making medicine with plants, you discard the plant matter after you're done using it, right? Maybe you compost it, maybe you do something else with it. But in alchemy, you use that to make the so-called body aspect of the medicine. And this in turn becomes the salt. So there's a whole process around that I won't get into. Basically, it's a calcination process. And you make a salt from the actual plant matter instead of discarding it. And you're utilizing all of these different aspects. You're making the body, the soul, the spirit of the plant, and you're taking that wholeness, that whole aspect of the plant and all of its elements, and you're bringing in that medicine for the wholeness of you, the person, on all these levels. So it truly is slow medicine, number one, because it takes a lot of time and energy and intention to make a spagyric. But what I thought was fascinating was that these were remedies that were really recommended for people in their Akashic readings. The ones that were most commonly, like the types of spagyric remedies that were most commonly recommended, had to do with healing trauma, healing of the solar plexus, and healing of the heart. There's a lot of different plants that can help support in doing that. So that was very different and variable depending on the person. But overall, a lot around healing trauma and how really supportive the spagyrics were for that, and the solar plexus and the heart. So I know that one was really fascinating for me that came through. I had trouble even, the recommendations come in from the records, but then there's like the work to actually find the remedies. And unfortunately, there's not a ton of resources for spagyrics. One of my favorites is one of my teachers around spagyrics, which is Seja Papam. We're actually going to have him on the podcast again this month. And I'm actually going to ask him more. And we're going to talk more about spagyric medicine because I think it's so fascinating and important, and this concept of alchemy around it. But he's one that I know that they made spagyric medicine. I'm not sure if that's still available, but if it is, I'll make sure to link up that resource below. I know there's a lot of independent medicine makers out there and herbalists who are making their own spagyrics as well. A lot are on Etsy, so I highly recommend you connect with them, learn more. I feel like this is an art that is in a way sort of resurging. There's a resurgence of this art of alchemy with spagyrics, and it's exciting because it really is coming back to this concept of slow medicine, which is another theme that I'm really going to start to dive into. And with my dear friend Megan Liebman, I know that some of you who are old-time listeners of the Feed Your Wild podcast used to tune into the Moon Musings with myself and Megan. And so Megan's going to start to come back on, and we're going to really talk about this concept of slow medicine and the importance of that. So stay tuned for all of that. And if there are any questions, reflections, ahas, I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me on Instagram. I'm at Wildly Rooted. You can check out all the show notes at wildlyrooted.com. And if this was helpful, supportive, intriguing, or you just enjoy the podcast in general, I would love, and appreciate if you are on Apple Podcasts to leave a rating and review, because it really does help us to get out into this space, to play with the algorithms that are in place so we can get in front of more people and just reach more people to support this incredible transition space that we're all in, so we can really tap into and access the powers of healing that we all have. So, with that, I'm sending you so much love, and I'll see you next time.